Hi everybody, it is the Raising a Warrior team again, me and Naomi, and we are doing another Raising a Warrior Meets interview. Now you know that we always get very excited to introduce our guests to you, and today is definitely no exception. So we are absolutely thrilled to have the wonderful Jane Wilson with us today. Now, Jane is a speech and language therapist, and judging by all her credentials and qualifications, she's a very passionate one at that. She's worked all over the place. She's worked for the NHS, she's worked in schools, she's worked with early years workers, she's trained teachers and parents and nursery staff. I mean, she's done the whole caboodle. Now, I have to mention this little claim to fame for Jane. Let me get this right here. The UK's first sustainable, environmentally conscious speech and language therapy resource. Massive congratulations for that, Jane. Yeah. That's an incredible accomplishment. Really good. Now, we've asked Jane on because obviously we're very passionate about communication, and we wanted to delve into the real sciencey side of speech and language, and we knew that we needed a very special speech and language therapist to help us do that. So she's going to come, she's here now to share all her amazing wisdom with you. We're going to run through the questions, and as always, it is Naomi to start.
Okay, so first question. What might a speech difficulty look like in an older child, so about 7+ years?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good place to start, actually. So I just want to start by saying that actually it's much more common than people think. Right. So I've got some stats today. You have asked for the sciencey side of things. So roughly in every classroom, 10% of children have got a speech language communication difficulty. Wow. So if you think about a typical classroom having between 20 and 30 children, that's, you know, every classroom 2 and 3 kids. Wow. So children and young people, so it's much more common than people think. What that might look like, so it might look like, so a child might not be speaking as much as their peers, and they might find it difficult to express themselves verbally. When they are talking, their speech might sound more immature, so that their talking might sound like the talking of a much younger child. Other things like they might find it difficult to find their words. So, you know, when you and I are tired and we get that tip of the tongue phenomenon, and you just can't find that word. You know it's there, but you can't find it. Some children have that they have that problem. It's word finding difficulty, and they have it all the time. So it might look like that. It might be that they can respond to questions, but then they put their words in the wrong order. So it can sound really jumbled up and a little bit confusing for the listener as well. So there's that side of things. And then there's the other side where they might not understand what's being said to them. Okay. So, and then this can quite often be misinterpreted by adults and children as well. So it might appear that the child is not listening or is perhaps misbehaving. So it might be that the teacher asks them to do something and they either do the opposite or something completely different, or they just don't respond. And that might be a child that is not understanding what is being said to them. So it can present itself in lots of different ways, and it's quite often, speech and language difficulties are quite often misdiagnosed as behavioural difficulties or attention and listening difficulties. But actually, you know, it's that frustration that the child is feeling of not being able to communicate what they want to communicate, but also on the flip side, perhaps they're not understanding what's being said to them, and then they're getting that label of, you know, the naughty child or the one that never listens. But actually there's more going on there for that child. So I hope that answers. Does that answer your first question?
Yeah, that's really good, because I think as well that it's something that people just, when you think speech and language, it's just like, oh, someone can't pronounce their words properly. But the way you've explained it is actually, no, it can come in many different forms, and that we should have an awareness that actually it might be a facilitator for some behavioural stuff as well.
Absolutely. There's, I mean, so many different things that I could talk about, but I know we haven't got time to talk about today. I could talk about it all night. I seriously could. But I'm just trying to pick out, you know, if you're thinking about what this child could look like, those are some of the things that a young person could be presenting with.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Right. Question 2. Yeah, I'm really intrigued about this question. What's the difference between a speech difficulty and a language difficulty?
Okay, so probably the best way to explain this is to tell you the difference between speech and language, and then you'll have an idea of, you know, what those different difficulties would look like. So I'm going to start with speech. So speech is the sounds that we make and the sounds that we put together to make words. It's a developmental process. So lots of young children, little children, I know we're not here to talk about those little ones tonight, but lots of little children find speech sounds difficult because it's a developmental process. So that's speech sounds. But also part of speech is how fluently we speak, so without little bumps and things like that. So again, if you think about when we're really tired, and sometimes we trip over our words and we might get stuck and say the same word a couple of times. That's not what we typically do, but some children have difficulties with that, and that's also part of speech. And then the third part of speech is how we use expression in speech. So it's the intonation that we use, it's the volume, it's the pitch, and all of that element of speech adds to the meaning of the words that we use. So those are speech, and hopefully you can appreciate now, if you've got a speech difficulty, you've got difficulties with that area of speech and language. Okay. Yeah, you're there. Okay. Language. So when I talk about language, I split it into 2 different. So the first part is I'm going to start with using language actually. So the first part is using language. So those are, that is the words that we have in our word store. And also that's all the vocabulary that we have. And then it's how we use our vocabulary to make sentences. And then it's those words and vocabulary that we've got in sentences, but putting the words in the correct order. So that what we speak and what we say makes sense. So that's using language. And then understanding language is being able to process what's being said to you, hold it in your memory, and then understand it and then respond appropriately. So you can have difficulties with speech, understanding language and spoken language. You can have difficulties in all 3 areas, or you could just have a specific difficulty with sounds or a specific difficulty with using language. I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is it fair to sort of put speech difficulties as more of a physiological problem and language difficulties is more of a cognitive problem? Would that be? Yeah. Okay.
You're going in deep now. Oh my goodness. Sometimes it can be, yes, but we also have what's known as a speech processing system. And then we start to get into the realm of speech processing then, which we definitely haven't got time to talk about today. But a speech sound difficulty, it can be that the child has got specific difficulties with their motor control of all the, the tongue, the lips. There's so many things involved in speech sound production. So it could be that,
Okay. All right.
I'm not going to sidestep that one this evening. We'll be here all night.
Okay.
Question number 3. How might a speech or language difficulty impact an older child in a social situation?
Oh, yes. Oh, do you know what, it could be so isolating, and really upsetting. Yeah, if you think about everything that we've kind of talked about this evening already, and then that child is really struggling, could be really, and then to put them in a social situation, perhaps with peers who are perhaps not so patient, not so understanding, it can be really hard for children. You know, they could get, you know, bullied, and it could be a really not pleasant experience for them. They can get, you know, isolated from their peers and things like that. Really tricky. And then, you know, because they're not able to get their message across, they're not able to make themselves understood. Perhaps they're getting the wrong end of the stick in conversations, and, you know, responding inappropriately through no fault of their own. But it can be really, really difficult. And actually, there are figures. Let me dig deep for those figures for you. I think it's 80% of 80% of children, young adults, young people, that have got behavioural and emotional disorders. 80% of those children have got undiagnosed speech language communication difficulties. Yes, so it can have an absolutely huge impact on their emotional well-being, their, you know, sense of worth. They find it difficult to form friendships and maintain those friendships. And you guys will know how important friendships are, how important those peer interactions and that peer support is for young people. It's just it's really heartbreaking. And there's another figure that I'm going to try and do you remember?
I'm liking your memory. I'm like
so children, young people with speech language communication difficulties, they are 3 times more likely to be referred to adolescent mental health services than a child without speech and language. So it was a really great question, because it just throws up, you know, so many questions and reasons that these children need support.
Well, it's quite interesting, because some children that I've had time to interact with, you can see when you ask them, like, how are you, what's your day been, they just go, good. And you think that was a bit too quick. And also you say that to every answer. So then I go, well, what's good? And then you start to realize they've got nothing behind that good, because they don't know how to say, well, I felt like this, or I had this feeling, or this event happened today. So
and you know what, Naomi, that could be so many different reasons for that response. It could be that child is just that they're so disengaged because they're really struggling with their communication, that they're not engaging anymore in that social interaction. It could be that they've really not understood the question. It could be that they've not had time to process it, that they've not got the vocabulary, or they can't find the vocabulary. It's really in depth, and there's so many reasons, but it's interesting that you see it too.
No, I think it's and like you say, it's something that there's an expectation of being able to grasp, and we've taught you through the years, you should know it, but like you say, there's so many gaps and holes within that fabric that you think, actually, how many children have got like this moth-eaten blanket of communication, but can't tell anybody that they're struggling.
And it's far-reaching. It has impacts on all aspects of their life and their well-being and their future prospects and their friendships. It's huge. It really is huge.
But what a shame that it's being so misunderstood, you know, the difficulties, and what a shame that they're being put forward for the wrong kind of help.
And it's often misdiagnosed in older children. Perhaps they have been struggling, and they've been monitored, or let's just keep an eye, but that gap between them and their peers just gets wider and wider. And if you think about a child in year 2, so perhaps a 7-year-old, they've transitioned from that year 1 to year 2. It's a big transition, and all of a sudden there's this expectation of them to access the curriculum, and it's all spoken, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing is spoken, and they just can't access any of it, and that's when the behaviour starts. So they either, you see that undesirable behaviour because they're so frustrated, or they completely retreat and they just disengage, and really worrying.
Oh,
it is, but it's fascinating that people are like you yourself, you're starting to talk about it and educate people to see the red flags.
Yes, and that's so I'm really passionate about that, and I work with lots of early years practitioners because early intervention is key. So it's so important that we raise awareness. Everybody needs to know. 3 kids in every classroom, teachers need to know, you know.
Yeah. Oh, bless you, can really feel your passion. It's wonderful.
I get a bit carried away.
All right, final question. In your opinion, how might speech therapy positively impact an older child's life?
Yeah, I mean, the impacts can be so huge. I mean, the main aim of getting involved with an older child that has got significant difficulties would be to maximise their communication potential, so that they reach their speech language communication potential. And then what that means is that they are going to reach their academic potential for them. It also means they're going to be able to make friends, maintain those important friendships, and enjoy those social interactions, which we know are so important for their mental well-being. It also means that they can achieve the best that they can in terms of academic outcomes, and then, you know, future life chances are also more positive, and more likely to end up in employment, things like that, and less likely to be referred to these mental youth mental health services as well. The other side of getting involved with a young person, you know, at 7, 8, 9, even older, is that it gives me the opportunity then to educate the adults that work with them, so that they've got an understanding, so that they can make the curriculum more inclusive, they can make the curriculum more accessible, but also, you know, we can educate the peers as well. So kids are brilliant, aren't they? If you give them the facts and say, you know, this is why he doesn't always respond as quickly as you do, then they can be understanding, can't they? And they can give him more time, him or her. I'm saying him, girls as well. But you know, and all of that is going to impact on their social well-being. So it can be huge. And then also, you know, the other side of that is providing parents with the support they need, because often parents have been saying for a really long time, something's not right, you know, he's struggling, he doesn't understand, but the feedback they're getting is, oh, he'll get there in time, just give him time, her time, and he'll get there. And it's, you know, 10%, that's not the case, that's not true, and parents are often not listened to in these situations. So it's about supporting parents and giving them the skills and the tools to support the children as well, because it's not something that's going to go away. It's something that could potentially be lifelong, so everybody needs the skills to support that young person. So look, lots of positives, I think, personally.
It's just so exposing, isn't it? It's such an exposing thing, because the 3 of us here, we are using speech and language to communicate this message to each other, to form a partnership together. It's all speech and language. So it's just so exposing for these poor children when they're struggling with it. And you can see how that would have a massive impact on confidence. Amazing.
Absolutely. It's an essential life skill. Essential. You know, you need to be able to have communication skills to access everything. So it is an essential
and
life skill.
like you say, without communication, it's so hand in hand with confidence. So
Absolutely,
we're all talk about, I remember as a kid, like, you know, when you do your first public speaking and you have to stand up and you're like, you're shaking your piece of paper, but it's that confidence of being able to talk to others. They've already had that first experience of that chipping away at the confidence. The next time they come to it, they'll be like, no, because last time it was like ... act can just be enormous.
Yeah. And it's true of some, there are some older children that have had speech difficulties when they were younger that have resolved, but still those difficulties, although they've resolved, they still have a knock-on impact on their confidence. Quite often for those children, the advice that I give to parents is make them read, but not just make them read aloud, because that is practicing their spoken language, but with no pressure at all. So there's no pressure. You're not going to get it wrong. You know, it's written down. You know, there's nobody asking questions. It's, you know, it's really predictable. That's what the advice that I give is: lots and lots of practice of reading aloud. But yeah, huge impact on confidence.
Yeah. Oh, it's all fascinating. My goodness, it's all so exciting. So exciting.
Wonderful. Now, I think we will probably wrap this up because my internet is deciding to not play ball tonight. So I want to make sure that this recording is as good as it can be for everybody watching. So I think we will wrap this up. Jane, you have answered the questions amazingly. It has been such a pleasure having you here. So thank you so much from us for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I think we will be working with you again in the future. Sneaky feeling. So, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Massive, massive, big hugs. Lots of love from Naomi and myself. And we will be speaking to you all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.